The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to the Forge Fitness, Nutrition, and Habit podcast. I am your host, Michael S. Parker. Today, I am joined by a true veteran of the fitness industry, someone who's been coaching, educating, leading in health and performance since 1989. Now, with over 35 years of experience as a trainer, he's an educator, an author. He holds a bachelor's in sports management, a master's in rehabilitation with a focus on injury prevention. And over the years, he's opened gyms, he's run his own studios, he's worked with corporate fitness programs across 20 clubs. He taught at Bryan University, which is where I met him. And he even spent time with Exos and a little stint at PowerPlate. Currently, he is serving as the fitness supervisor at Sun City, where his philosophy is really simple but powerful. He's trained everybody from everyday people to professional athletes. But if I were to guess what he's most proud of, it's not the resume or his education. It's that throughout his career, he's provided for his family and he built a life rooted in movement and strength. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Rex Owens to the show.
Michael, it's an honor to be on the podcast, and I hope the listeners get something out of it.
You have just a special way of interacting with people. There is a calmness that you bring, and it makes sense that you would be the kind of guy who's dedicated his entire life to improving the lives of others. Let's dive in here because we got a lot to cover, and I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you're there on site with your group. You know, mobility is something that a lot of Americans struggle with. We have a very, very deconditioned population, and it's only getting worse with age. That's what we're even seeing, and we're in the online space. I'm not in the front line with the demographic that you're currently more involved with. And I just wanted to ask you a few things, because you've studied extensively biomechanics and corrective exercise. You've worked with every population, and you've seen from fit athletes all the way to people who have catastrophic injury. But why is mobility such a critical piece of healthy aging?
Yeah, it's a big question. So obviously, having worked with athletes all the way to like the oldest person I had this week is 96. And it's awesome because he and I, it's like we argue, fuss and fight. He's like an older uncle or something, But so back to your question, mobility. If you want your joints to work correctly, there's like a balance between stability and mobility. If you're too stable, you're not mobile. If you're too mobile, you're not stable. I think most of the trainers out there would know that. But the problem is as you age, it starts to, like, I've never had a job where I sat until this one. And then I'm like, oh, that's why people get bad backs. Cause you know what I mean? So if you're not maintaining adequate flexibility around a joint, and we all know that, length tension, there's a certain length that muscles want to operate at optimally. And if they're too short or too long, active insufficiency or passive insufficiency, what happens is that muscle's not able to do its job as well. So basically, when I talk to clients, what I say, it's kind of like you ever had some tight shoes on or a shirt that was too tight. At the end of the day, you've been working against yourself. So I go, you could save energy, move more freely and better. So that's how I look at mobility. Also here, I kind of feel like there's a drying up effect. This isn't scientific, but this is just something I noticed. Having grandkids, and you look at this, then I come in and I look at someone older, including myself, because I'm past 60. It's almost like each cell doesn't have the same water content. It's not as pliable and mobile and all that. Being able to move well is based on mobility, not excessive mobility. I don't want it, under, but adequate. So I think sometimes people will go in and stretch and they'll just stretch everything. And it's like, is that always the case? In general, you can do that, but also sometimes you have to get a lot more specific.
It is so important to be mobile at any age. The joint is the victim of the muscles. If you have an altered reciprocal inhibition, inappropriate length tension relationship, you're going to have a dynamic power problem because our body's a system of pulleys and levers. And that doesn't just affect older people. So how can we inspire people to understand that mobility is the bedrock to force production and the longevity of their mechanical system, which is their body?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is we always think more is better. Like I'm one of those people, I could kick straight up in the air right now. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a problem. But I've always been able to do that, even though I have to kind of fight to maintain that. Because I was an old Taekwondo guy. There's really no reason to be able to do that necessarily. But I think the biggest thing is we compare ourselves to others. Like you go into yoga and you think like you should, if you can do everything the same way, maybe you're too loose, who knows? But I think the biggest misconception is more is always better. If you look at some of the top jumpers in the world, there's certain joints, like you look at the calves and stuff, they're pretty springy. You know what I mean? Like there's enough mobility, but they're getting that, elastic, elongation. So just stretching more. Why are you stretching? When are you stretching? What type of stretches you're doing? I think there has to be some look at that. And then how it relates to like stretching to, like you said, the flexibility and mobility are not necessarily the same because I might have range of motion, but no joint control. And so that's problematic too. So I think the biggest misconception is always more is better. And it's not necessarily adequate is better. You don't need to be able to do the splits, for instance. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean you're like when you look at a gymnast doing splits sideways, I don't mean front to back, but like sideways. That's not normal joint range of motion in your hips. Hence, you don't see any old gymnasts, do you? I mean, I've never seen a 30-year-old gymnast. So I think that that's the biggest thing. The fallacy is just more is always better instead of trying to get specific. And then maybe with if we're hopefully talking to coaches for the most part, like what type of flexibility are you doing? Is it developmental? Are you just doing it as a part of your warm up before you go? So that might be more preparatory, and that might look a little bit different than the other things that you're doing.
You mentioned aging and the 30-year-old gymnasts, and you just did a kick in the air and you're over 60. So if somebody is starting to feel quote unquote stiff as they're aging, say 40s, 50s, 60s, what are the very first steps that you recommend to help them recover and then preserve their mobility?
So somebody's lacking mobility and they come in. I'm first going to do some type of an assessment to see, but I can also listen, wants, needs, and abilities. Like they want to be more mobile because they feel like they're tight, especially for like the older people come in here and they want to be mobile, but you have to prioritize because if you give them just like 30 things on a mobility program, it's like you got to pick 2 or 3 because not everyone's remembering because they haven't spent their whole life in the gym. Like even when I was in high school, like I'd never been to a commercial gym because there were none around. I'd never seen one. And instead of thinking the specifics of where they're feeling tight, if it's all over, I might be thinking hydration and some things like that are also going to be of assistance. And then what kind of flexibility do they need? I notice everyone defaults to Hoka shoes because they've lost mobility in their ankle. And so now they're all elevated and they're tipped forward. Now we've got more falls. So it's kind of a cascade. But at the same time, an athlete might be starting to he's not 20 anymore and he's starting to get older. So you want to maintain that adequate flexibility. And what you're going to do is really going to be based on like the assessment process, and I'm really looking left to right asymmetries, not so much front to back, because if I see that, I know that there's a problem there. If I see one side's like really mobile and the other side's like not, obviously that's problematic. But I usually start from the foundation and work my way up and see kind of what's going on with them and what's affecting. Because obviously, if something's at the ankle subtalar joint, every other joint's going to be affected by that.
The kinetic chain, it does break down and it starts at the ankles. I wanted to go back to one thing real quick, and then I wanted to cover something you had said. You would, just to preface that though, you had said that sometimes people, they look at too many different things to address with their mobility. That's going to be my primary question, but I just wanted to make a comment. For those of you who don't know, the kinds of shoes that Rex is talking about is a very elevated heel, and it puts you in an artificial state of plantar flexion that exceeds your natural arch and your ability for your ankles, knees, and hips to stabilize, and it causes your center of gravity to change, and that's why people fall in these things. Now, it makes them feel like they have a better mobility in their ankle, knees, and hips, but it's all artificially applied. And then it actually makes it worse when they take those shoes off because now their calves are over tight and their tibialis anterior is lengthened. Now we have a major problem because you don't want to live in your shoes. So I wanted to just clarify if anybody didn't know what that was and what concept he was speaking of. But then now back to this specificity. Are there any specific corrective exercises or strategies on mobility or mobility drills that you think that everyone should just practice regularly?
I think the biggest one, if I had to just pick one, it's bend over, grab your ankles and drop it like it's hot. Get your hips all the way down. Because if you look around the world, I don't care if you're in the Amazon forest or you're in a rice paddy in the Mekong Delta or you're a goat person in the mountains of Macedonia. You need to be able to get your hips down low. And it's like, I don't care what age they are. Like you look at some third world countries where people having to, have the Turkish toilets or whatever they're called. They maintain that ability to squat deep like that their whole lives. And that's an unloading of the spine versus sitting your butt down. And then now you're compressing and, doing those kinds of things. So I guess bending forward with bent knee, grab your ankle and then drop your hips. Can you get below parallel? Can you get all the way down? That's something that I would probably feel like most people should work on. Though I will say, like, if I get someone that's at the tip over, or I might give them that thing in a different way. I could obviously have you on a quadruped position and have you just sit your hips back all the way to your heels or thereabout. You know what I mean? To try to get that. But I like to do it in real world environment where it's functional, like being able to get down there. But you know what I'm saying? Once those hips goes, like, I know that like if you're in a quadruped on all fours and you can't get your hip past your knee line, you can't squat like that either. So which means now you're going to have to bend over and then you're going to tell me you have a bad back. So there's all these cascading things. And it doesn't always happen like that. For instance, that I see on a daily basis is obviously, my movement, once I put any motion into my spine, everything's limited. But if you can't rotate when you walk, but just two counter rotations, you start walking in the frontal plane. It's that simple. I watch it happen for people because I've been here for 4 years now, and I'll watch someone that's 75 and then suddenly they're 79. They're not, can't rotate. And so they start walking like this. It's much easier to fall that way. Like if I stub my toe and start to fall forward, that's happened thousands of times in my life. Even an older adult will react faster to that. But if you tip over sideways, I've been falling over sideways as well. So we have to teach all kinds of things like fall prevention and things like that too. But
That's a great piece of advice, by the way, just the simple reach down for your ankles and sit your butt down. Babies are my favorite to use because then
yes, babies
people
own that position.
Yeah, babies, man, they're the professional squatters. And
Yeah.
I used to use that as an example all the time. I would add something that we have a lot of people who sit all day long, and you were talking about spinal compression, but there's another consequence to the excessive sitting, which is a protracted shoulder girdle, where you just get that concave collapse and then you get the cervical lordosis. And before you know it, you got that jutting head and then all kinds of problems in the AC joint, the acromial joint starts to get all pissed off. And then, as you mentioned, you've got the lat problem. Lats are just really, for a lot of people, they're a mess. So I've always talked about scapular retraction and depression, and then just making sure that your head is back to get that spinal alignment. In addition to be able to do a squat, those two things combined, I think, is a winning formula. And that's only two things. But if you had to choose one, I'm going with what Rex suggested. If that's the only thing you're going to do. So how do you approach mobility differently when it's training an athlete versus when you're going to train somebody who's in an aging population?
Yeah, someone aging, like dehydrating. And when I say aging, it's really weird because you could get like the other day, this 78-year-old guy was like barefoot water skiing, looked like he was 20. And I'm not blowing smoke. I'm like, the dude was carving some stuff up. I can have someone at 68, which is closer to my age, come in and they're in a walker. With an athlete, I have a battery of assessments and probably are just picking up like what's not normal for them or normal range to play their sport might say, or because there's a golf course well, you can't see outside my window, but to the right there, like if I threw a rock out that way, it would go through the gym and land on a golf course. Mobility for a sport, sometimes you have to have specific things there. Whereas if it's general mobility, we want someone to be able to move free and easy and looking at left to right asymmetries, like we talked about, like the length of a muscle, the length tension stuff to make sure that it's able to do its job optimally and not compromise something else. So the difference is that the athlete's probably going to get something a lot more specific because it's based on assessment, whereas somebody may come in and just want to do a general fitness program. And we do have some comprehensive assessments, but they can choose not to do that because honestly, for some people that just haven't moved their whole life or haven't moved in a long time, they just need to get moving. We don't need to, we could say like, well, you don't want to do the wrong thing. It's like, watching ranges of motion, but everyone's going to push something, pull something. They have to pick it up off the ground, Amazon package, and put it up on the shelf or something. I know they need to do that. They bend over and do a lot of gardening, and if they have a sport, which is usually pickleball, where I work, there's 900 people in pickleball alone. So those of you that want to do sports training and you want to, I think the average trainer thinks of older adults as harder. It's easier. I realize that like they have all these problems, but they're not coming in going like, you have to absolutely like slaughter me or I won't think it's a good program. You can actually teach them stuff and they think that's good. You know what I mean? As opposed to how hard, because I do believe that, when I was younger, how hard were those workouts? I work out with grapplers. So it's like, we're all trying to get down and outdo each other and compete. But it's like now, the game is, I'm going to be the guy that keeps it the longest. I'm not as big, strong, or flexible, but I just want to have exactly what I need for my life. And I think at some point you have to say, what's not acceptable to you? I think that's the caveat. It's not acceptable for me that if I drop something on the ground, I can't bend over and pick it up. So I want to interdict that long before. But a lot of people, if I had to say what happens when you see those people in the walkers, you're doing something in your 40s and 50s and you got the back thing going. So you don't move as much in your 60s. Suddenly you're upper 60s and you're getting things because you didn't move. And then suddenly 70s are a disaster. You've got to try to get something done prior to that. But then there's that motivation question like, Why aren't they doing it? But I do think these younger generations, I'm not a gamer, but I play one game, Titanfall. I played this morning from 5 a.m. or from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. Yeah, non-wife time. And I'll come up, maybe if I play an hour tonight, same guys are playing. And you know what? They're not younger. A lot of these guys, I talk to guys in Australia, Brazil, England, and, in the Southern United States. And there are guys that are like my age or older, but all they do is game. And it's like the younger crowd, I think it's even worse because you grow up gaming. And I've seen it where I've done assessments where you assess like, their ability to hinge, and I'll ask someone to hinge and they'll do this. Can you see that? Where
Yeah.
they're just rounding their spine, and you're like, no, bend over at the hip joint. And they're like, no, because what they've been doing is this. You know what I mean? And so I find that a lot of younger people are going to be worse off because I don't know about you, but I rode my bike to school. I walked to my friend's house. Now, even my own children, all three of them were driven because everything's further. So I'm not saying people are necessarily just lazy. And there's also more cars and it's more dangerous. So the people growing up today are not going to be as capable. So that's clientele that's coming right now. If you look, half of consumer spending is from people older than 50. 83% of household wealth is, people older than 50. It's going to double by 2050. It's the largest demographic in America, and they have the most money. I'm the last year, so I missed the money part, but I definitely feel like, I'm getting there myself. And so a lot of it's trying to maintain what I have.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's a sad state of affairs that for those who have an inclination towards higher level of mobility training and are going to be the trainers that are going to get probably a bit of that share of people who are going to be coming into the realization when they're retiring and they can't move. They play golf once a week, but now they want to play 3 times and they're so sore they can't even move from just swinging a club. That's not going to be acceptable to people. And I like what you said earlier too. In fact, I have 2 things. You had said that it's unacceptable to you to not be able to bend down and pick up your keys.
Yeah, no.
It's ridiculous. But I'm going to ask you one more question on mobility, but it's kind of on the back of something you had said earlier. And I just wanted to clarify it because I don't think people really understand this, that too much of a good thing. But could you tell us a little bit about why mobility or overstretching causes problems? Like,
sometimes I'll just give an example, like a mechanical example, like say this fits in this, right? And it's supposed to move like this. But if there's a lot of play in the system, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. You're wasting or leaking energy. One. Okay. The other thing is that you don't have optimal joint centration, or where it's not staying where it's supposed to and be able to move. And so it's gravitating like this, rounding forward. Everyone gets, like anterior lateral shoulder pain. If something's too loose, think of it as kind of loose and wobbly, not able to produce as much force. And if it's too tight, it's grinding. So a lot of times, like to me, the joint surfaces don't touch, but eventually if you get arthritis, somebody shifted somewhere, like you said, that anterior pull, the elevation of the humeral head underneath the acromion, and after a while, you're fraying all these tendons. Yeah, I guess that's how I would think of it.
that's a great analogy. That was exactly the kind of answer I was looking for that question. Absolutely perfect. Then in using the ball socket is a really great way because, if it's loose in there, I even think of things like mechanical things, like a machine that is all loose like that, it's just going to go to shit. And then if it's too tight, it's going to be grinding and screeching.
It grinds.
Let's transition into some new topics. I was wanting to talk to you about, since you have been in the industry for so long, that's high level of sustainability in your career. But I wanted to talk about sustainability for people's fitness and for their diet lifestyle, because this is what I am finding to be one of the biggest problems in our work, is the retention of clients into a sustainable protocol, because everybody's looking for the quick fix. Nobody's really willing to put in the perpetuity. They look at fitness is just the thing I'm doing for now, or this diet is just what I'm doing because a social media influencer told me to do it. And people are so easily programmed into laziness or into gimmicks, to fads, to tricks, because it's all based on the promise and the false hope that that's going to solve all their problems with minimal effort and as little expense as possible. We all know that that is not how life really works. I have a problem with this all or nothing fucking bullshit. It is such a problem in our culture where people think that if they can't have the most perfect plan and the most perfect diet on paper, then it's not worth it to them. And it's funny too, because they're not even willing to execute what's written. Tell me, since many people think that fitness and nutrition has to be all nothing, how do you help your clients build routines that actually stick? Because you have a client that you've been training for 30 years, since he was 50 years old and now he's 80. How'd you get him to stick?
Every session Need to learn something new. The other thing is that I tend to focus on the things that, like when you're talking to your client, you get to know them, you start to find like what's the most important thing. And I kind of use that as to beat them, you know what I mean? Because there's got to be something important enough for them to want to do it. Here, especially, I think that, I mean, like, I'm not the best speaker in the world, but when you leave me, and I believe I can help you. And usually I'm farming these clients out to, my trainers. But what they get, if they come in thinking like, oh, there's nothing to be done. And if you can really teach them something before they leave that they can start on. So I always kind of like, even in a consult, like if I don't get you started on something, like, even get a concept out there that they're willing to do, I have to find something that they're willing to do. And that's a great place to start. So it could be like, it depends on what the problem is. A lot of times here, it's like my leg strength or something, right? You know what I mean? So I might, and what that means is that when you're taking a step, if you can't balance on that leg, you'll take a shorter step and you start chop stepping and then you start rocking side to side. So I'll have them say, hey, tomorrow, what I need you to start practicing, every time you go down your hallway, I want you to march in place. Lift that leg as high as you can and notice I have my hands out. So, because they're worried about falling. So if I can get them to be more stable on one leg and then to hold it longer without, trundling, like, their hip drop or any of that. I gave you a specific example, but if I can find anything that gets them started on it, you know what I mean? And that's where what I kind of figure out on the consult. You came in with a specific reason that motivated you enough. How do I tap into that and get you started with something even before a training session? Maybe like you said, on the wall, getting doing your alignment and doing some postural stuff. It could be postural. They're worried about posture. They're worried about falling. They're worried about leg strength. And then a lot of them, because this is an active community, 55 and older. And so it's not a care community. It's like, there's some people that I see out there and I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. You know what I mean? There's some people that could do some specific things that's amazing. As far as nutrition goes, I like to I'm not one of those people that want someone to keep a recall for a long time. I wouldn't mind 2 weekdays and a weekend, but if I can get them to 24-hour recall or give me 3 foods you commonly eat. So I could take those, put it into the calorie amounts, giving them the quantities that would match that, and then start to substitute things. So, um, if somebody's a picky eater and they don't want to have whatever it is in the morning, you know what I mean? I can start to get them to eat better. Like, hey, have some berries with your yogurt, or because protein's like another thing that's a big one. So I try to get them started, but I guarantee you right now, in my opinion, after 35 years, if you're trying to lose weight and you don't know exactly what you're doing tomorrow, you're going to do what you've always done. That's the way it always goes. And it may not be at the young, studs and people that you're training, but when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, that's a lot of years of habit. So me verbally trying to change them, I need them to recognize like, hey, you're going to write on the left side kind of what the plan of the day is. Just take 5 minutes. We've gone over, we looked at the foods you like. There's 6 foods right here that you can choose from that you can put there in the right quantities. But if the only thing you have to write on the right is if you vary, planned actual. But I honestly believe the best thing to do is have a plan for tomorrow. If you know that tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to have this. And so you have to shop for it. You have to, and I want to find as many things that they like. You know what I mean? Maybe it's seasoning something some way.
Mhm.
Hey, do you want 3 ounces of beef or 6 ounces of chicken? Because there's some people that are, I'm going to not give up okay, well, here's your choices here. Which one are you choosing?
That's really useful for anybody, whether you're a fitness professional who's coaching, you're somebody who is just trying to stay on your own fitness nutrition journey. It really comes down to your behaviors first and foremost. That's the key. But to kind of piggyback off what you had just said, in fitness, the best way to get people to continue to maintain their progress is to celebrate the little wins and change the way they think about what results are. I love using the 50 pounds because I think on average, that's what people always say. I'd like to lose 50 pounds. That is a crazy amount of body fat. That is so much. And people don't realize how much it is. If you were to extract, or at least have a visual representation, a pile of 50 pounds of fat that's on the floor heaped, I think that people would be shocked at how much is fitting into their bodies. And
Yeah.
it's not healthy. It does not help you. Getting people to change their mindset around what progress is really important to longevity in their program, or at least in their training. I like to call it training. It's interchangeable to workout, exercise, whatever. But I like the implication of training, and I don't always use the word, but I like it because it implies that you're working towards something. It's not just work. It is by its nature progressive. That helps people think in the terms of long term. And that's really important to meet people where they're at and say, what are you willing to do? Because that's the reality that I've found, because our average client at Forge is probably 35 years of age. My clients are definitely older. I do have some younger ones. I have maybe I have a handful of people in their 20s and 30s. Nearly all of my clients are 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's always been that way. Forge will turn 9 years old on January 1st. And
Congratulations.
yeah, I know. Can you believe that? And I have some clients celebrating their 9-year anniversaries with me.
Bravo for you. Yeah,
It's really great.
retention is key.
Retention, well, actually, Forge's retention is really, really high. Even with my other coaches in the mix, if you put me in the mix, our retention is like 90%. I haven't taken on a new client in 2 years. I was going to mention that our average client at Forge stays for 18 months on an online program. That's insane.
That is. That's amazing. So there's value there, you know what I mean? I agree with what you said. Celebrating the wins, which means to me, acknowledging and trying to get them to love the process. You know what I mean? If you're, say it's like they're walking their dog or something, right? And it's the first thing they're getting movement, I mean, that stuff, all of it's accumulative. If you, like you said, celebrating the small wins, because if you're just waiting for the end, it's never as satisfying as you think. You know what I mean? Like the person loses weight and it's like, okay, then there's tomorrow and now what? But if you really have celebrated and understood like what, to be proud of yourself in the process, exactly what you said, that's what, that's what gives them the longevity.
Yeah, the celebration. The other thing too, I know this is very cliche and it's a meme all over social media, and I was using this long before it became popular. I didn't coin the phrase, but I'd heard it and I've used it for years and years, which is that we don't work out because we hate our bodies. We work out because we love them.
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift. I have a couple mindset questions that have kind of popped up that I'll ask you in a minute. But before we do, let's like you're talking about nutrition. I also wanted to mention that was a really good tip, to just write the foods that you know you're going to eat, because it's almost the same paradigm as what we are doing with activity and fitness, right? Basically saying, here's what we can work with. And then building off of that makes people feel that not only are they not eating what they dislike, but then they're going to find themselves getting more interested. The seasoning tip is fantastic. Those little things absolutely matter. And it is a process of accumulation. My message to everybody is, and I'm hoping that through these podcasts and with the work we do at Forge, to get people to change the way that they think about fitness and nutrition. And that's really difficult to do. Let me ask you, from your perspective, what would you say are some of the most common mistakes that people make when they're trying start a new fitness plan or a diet, let's call it?
Yeah. And you know what? I think that instead of saying, hey, I'm just going to cut this food or whatever and do without, it's easier to add than to take away. So I'd be like, hey, I need you to get up, hydrate, have this yogurt with berries, and, oh, you still want, your eggs, which, I'm not opposed, just depending on what your cholesterol is like and all that. It's just like, make those things a little bit more, controlled. So focusing on the things that you should do, but that you'd want to do, what I mean? Not giving them food that they're not, because typically somebody comes in and it's like, eat this, or everyone was on like a bodybuilding type diet and it's like their last 12 weeks. And it's like, don't do that. They don't eat like that the rest of the year. You know what I mean?
They do
Bodybuilders, for
not.
instance, who are the best dieters in the world, but they look like that. Like, we probably both train numerous people. And I'm like, you see them that night after the contest, you're having beer, pizza, and then 2 days later, they still look great, but they don't look like that etched, you know what I mean? And that's crazy. No one can stay looking like that. I mean, once in a while you have like a Herschel Walker type body that always has been like lean and whatever, but yeah, dieting's challenging because people have their habits and they want what they want, but it's like, you can have what you want, but you can't have the quantity. And then eating for health and eating for weight loss, I don't necessarily put them together, meaning you can eat healthier and that should help you with weight loss because you're having more fibrous foods and things like that. But sometimes people just have selections of foods that don't know how to cook. I've even had someone ask me how to bake a potato, and I'm like, wow, you've gone your whole life and you don't know how to bake a potato.
I have noticed in the younger generation, the skill set related to food preparation is abysmal. That is something I've noticed here. They're always the first people to look for meal delivery services. The biggest thing that I started to realize, especially with Forge early on, was how many people would be like, oh, I just really don't have time to prep my meals. I really don't have time to cook. So the amount of menus that I've had to go through with people to find suitable selections of food, the amount of times I've had to sit with somebody as they're going through their HelloFresh to help them choose their food for the week. I don't mind doing it because I use it as an opportunity to teach them something, to have them
Yeah,
observe, to think
great
about
opportunity.
Well, and it's not just about what they're going to really want to eat that's supposed to help them get to their goal. It's usually losing weight, right? But I want to teach them how to nourish their bodies. What's the best decision to make? And how do you minimize waste? Because what I've noticed, a lot of people who do these meal delivery services, they end up just rotting in the freezer.
Yeah.
Because what they end up doing is they order Uber Eats and they go off the menu. There's all kinds of behavioral problems that I have to address. And one of the things I like about going through it with clients is because when you expose the need, then they're more likely to get on board. And plus you establish yourself as a professional, that you teach them things that they didn't know. And I feel like people really, really like that. And
Yeah, that's credibility right there. Trust and credibility are two things that I think are important. You know what I mean? That's how, that's another thing that how you keep clients, when they trust and realize the credibility. We go to courses, we're constantly learning. I mean, what I would say after 35 years is like, hey, I'm starting to learn a little bit about fitness now. You know what I mean? Because it's like when I look at the books I haven't even read yet that I already have in my queue, and I'm like, dude, I don't know any of that. You know what I mean? I mean, there's some amazing areas like, in-depth neuro stuff or whatever. But I don't like to go down too much of any specific rabbit hole because I have to be a good generalist so that when somebody presents, like when was the last time you had a client with MS? You know what I'm saying? So I know we're going to have someone next week. I've had a dozen of them in my lifetime, but I'll go back and like read everything that's current on training someone with MS because there might be a tip that I forget, temperature controlling or something, you know what I mean? So whatever it is, you have to be a good generalist unless people are coming specifically, like if like at Exos, you might have a guy that's like just a speed guy. And like they spent their whole career. So sometimes I'll hear other people say they're a speed guy. And I'm like, no, that other guy's a speed guy. He doesn't do anything but speed. The rest of us are training athletes and we can coach these things and help them get better. And I'm talking about like at Exos, it's like an elite level, like there's Olympians there. You know what I mean? Like I'm not coaching an Olympian on his first three steps. You know what I mean? Unless I was a specialist in that. So
it's mentioned,
I think, go ahead.
I was going to say that generalization as a fitness professional now is more important than it's ever been. One of the things that I did to maintain the ability for specialization was that I hired coaches that were great generalists with the specialization. And I can tell you exactly what they do. For example, Coach Millie, she is a great generalist, but she also is very good with Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis. So we have clients who are in those special populations. We work a lot with people with neurodegenerative disease. Coach Tate is an injury rehab specialist. That's what he does. If you got a problem from an injury, that guy can take you through it, but he's also really, really good with general population. Coach Cameron, he's our clinical physiologist with an emphasis in cardiovascular systems, still an incredible generalist, and actually is a really good strength coach too. And then Coach Sam. Coach Sam is an athletic development sports performance expert. She was a professional basketball player and a great generalist. But I was going to mention that, like, for me, it was a conscientious decision to have those kinds of coaches. Forge has gone through some ups and downs. We're in a bit of a weird space right now because we're trying to pivot for a saturated market that is heavily social media based. We're trying to pivot to a market that is now heavily AI influenced, and we're having to compete with high volume, low touch competitors all across the world. It's a really, really challenging market. And for us, we are working on a lot of things on the back end to separate us from that. We're trying to get out of the bloody waters of commoditization in the fitness world. And we're trying to find some new, crisp, clean blue oceans, which I've learned over the last 9 years at Forge, particularly, is that every time I get away from the bloody water, everybody fucking follows me. And then before you know it, they shit in my pool too. And then I have to go build another pool. So I know I'm to the point now where when I'm strategizing, I'm not looking out the next 24 months. I'm looking out the next 5 to 10 years now, because I'm having to be like, I saw AI coming. I didn't see it coming as fast as it with the quality that it has as such a short amount of time. But I was ahead of the curve on that. Now, Forge does not use AI at all for programming. Everything is handwritten, but we use AI a lot in the editing of this podcast when we're done is going to be heavily influenced by artificial intelligence. The way that we write our marketing, if you go to our Instagram and you see a video, that's just me spouting. That's just me talking. But if you look at all of the description and all the emojis and stuff, I don't have time to sit there and fucking put emojis in a social media post. I'm not 13. So I go to ChatGPT and I just tell it what it's about, and it will give me the notes, and it generates it all. I copy and I paste it right into Instagram. It takes so much time and energy off of me because I'm doing other things while it's populating. The video's loading. Oh, ready for that. Thank you. Got that. Put it in and send, and then boom, it's shared to the world. It's amazing how much all of this stuff has influenced us. But I know we kind of rabbit holed a little bit. So I'll pull it back around, because since we're talking about sustainability, I think is where this came in. We're talking about sustainability, not only as a fitness professional, but sustainability for clients or for people in general to maintain their commitment to their well-being, which people just don't. I mean, the success rate for fitness is really low, and I would love to see that change.
I know you, and I know you've grown for 25 years, because I hear people say that, oh, I've been doing it for 10 years. No, you repeated your first year 10 times is what happened. You have grown, and that's what the younger trainers need to know. You got to keep getting, honing your skills.
Got to have agility. Agility is required because your clients require it.
Yeah.
Every single client's different. And like, for example, if I have 5 client calls in a row, every single one of them is going to get a different, like a slightly modified version of myself. It's always me at the core. But there are clients who don't particularly enjoy the fact that I forget to not swear. And that is a problem. I've always had a bad potty mouth, I guess. And it comes out on the podcast once in a while. Sometimes I'll edit it out. Like I've done a couple, especially if I have Sarah on. Sarah instigates me to the F-bomb. When I had her on, I edited out probably 6 or 7, but in the show, there was probably 10. So I felt like it was a little overkill. So I just let's just go ahead, not do that one anyway. But yes, you're right. Your growth is really important. The agility to meet clients where they're at is such a necessary skill. And is it exhausting? In the beginning, you soon start to get your rhythm. And then working with clients is a joy. I tell people all the time that I don't actually work. I have the pleasure of showing up to help coach people to their sustainable fitness, nutrition, and habit success. I have a privilege.
Yeah.
I can imagine doing nothing else. It's fantastic. But so for those, just to capstone the kind of where we're going, and then we can move on to some of I have a couple of other questions for you that I thought would be interesting. But when it comes down to prioritization and what people are really willing to put into their workouts does play a role in whether or not they're going to stick with it.
Yes.
In your mind, if somebody only has, let's say 30 minutes, let's just use the ACSM guideline, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 150 total minutes, right? What would you say that the average person should prioritize to keep their body strong for the long term?
I would probably pick 4 things: a lower body, a core, a push, and some type of pull. Let me put it like this. We've been told, like women, older people, do high rep stuff. Then the bag of dog food weighs 80 pounds and they're not functioning well. So personally, I don't care if you could do a lot of something when you get older. I mean, if you can't garden for 6 hours straight and it's only 2 hours, more power to you. Do it more often. But stuff is as heavy as it's going to be, and life requires a certain amount of strength. So they have to work themselves up. So I would do strength training, but I'm talking about picking up a dumbbell, pressing it up, and it's a set of 6 or something, or even less sometimes. I'm going to progress there slower. Okay. And I have to make sure they don't compensate or arch or even fall over. So maintaining strength, I would probably do something that's power related. So let's just say, I'll just use an older adult, because obviously you could think of thousands of power exercises for younger people. But when they're trying to get out of a chair to try to almost power out and jump, or maybe have your arms up to slow them down, and they're not really going to get off the ground much. But older adults lose power. So if I'm strong enough to catch myself with my foot, but I can't get it out there fast enough and I can't react to it, then I'm going to fall. I'm going to get injured, those kinds of things. And a lot of if you want to stay active, you're going to need to be able to, play the pickleballs or the golf or the bocce ball or tennis or whatever it is that you're going to want to do. So yeah, I that's what I think that, yeah, I guess that's my answer.
That's a great answer. I've always said strength training. And of course I knew you were going to say that because you're competent. Now, some would argue, and I'm sure there's always an argument, right? Especially if this is going to be on social media. So there's always going to be some fucking prick who's going to say, it should be this and that. There's always detractors. There's always more detractors than there are people who praise you. That's just the nature of our modern society, especially with social media. Because you know what? Your screen can't punch you in the face. So people get away with saying a lot of dumb shit. But
yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do, man. That's why you don't very much see me on social media, like my personal social media. For a long time, I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't even have Facebook. It was completely empty. There's some stuff that's kind of leaked on there because Heather likes to post stuff for me because they're really pushing us to build a personal brand around me. And I've been so resistant to that. And now I'm regretting it because now that's the new trend. People don't really care about what Forge is doing. That everybody goes to my personal stuff. And it's like,
okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon that we've noticed. My adventure blog has gotten me more clients than the Forge website. It's crazy.
I looked at your blogs, tight. Good job. I read your creatine one yesterday and I was like, spot on. This is like the new stuff that's coming out, whether it's for bone health, cognitive, or just your general athletic performance, but there's a lot of good stuff coming out.
Yeah, I did another one. I don't know if you saw the one on aging populations related to Alzheimer's.
Is that with Millie Nunez?
No, not the
Oh,
podcast.
no, I thought, oh,
I
blog
wrote a
post.
blog
No,
article.
no, but
Yeah.
I'll get in there and dig in some more. I love when I find great resources, which is one of the things that's, like the veterans like ourselves, like I've watched all of them come up, like from Gray Cook or, Gary Gray and all that. So I was there at the beginning. And so you knew who to kind of follow. And, um, and then when I went to my first NASM course, and then he's one of the lead instructors, it was Rod Korn, who I know, Rodney.
Yeah, Ronnie's a great guy.
He's the head of education for Aleco now, but it was Lenny Parasino that stood up on stage and said, "You're going to get paid exactly according to what you know. So if I can solve a problem for my client, that's the value I have. How I get him there, we all have different philosophies or whatever, but the bottom line is I'm only as valuable as the problems that I solve." And most of the clients here, they just want to stay being able to be independent. You know what I mean? Because if you've seen someone go from independent to not, or to go from independent to not independent, it's like it's tough to see. So, motivating them to stay in the game, and that the process is important and not just the end. I think that that's very important. Last year, when I went to IDEA, I think I was talking to Brent Brookbush and Brookbush Institute, obviously a great site for education. But he was saying, no, Rex, I don't think it's that the younger people are not going to the conventions. He said, they're not doing education. And I'm like, well, how are you getting better if you're not constantly learning? So this year, IDEA was in Sacramento, my city. And I noticed it was probably about a third of its size. I'm glad to go. The education was tight, but as big as it was, or the show, it's not as big. And I thought it was because people are doing stuff online or this, that, and the other. And I am old school. I'd rather you give me the textbook. I'll read the textbook, then I'll watch the videos. But if I watch the videos, it's a little bit harder for me. I'm 61 years old, and it's like, I don't like to watch that much video. Give me a textbook. That's how I learn, by reading. So I'll read first and then watch. But anyways, I think education is key for you trainers, because that's how I don't burn out. In my first 5 years, I mean, I had a wife, 2 children, and man, people would be like, well, what do you do for a living? I'm a trainer. What's that? You know what I mean? Now everyone knows what we do. But back then there were less people buying training. And so, keeping a roof over my head was challenging. And so, I worked 7 days a week. Now, people know what we do. And if you can gain credibility, like even like when I worked with the general population, if I find one of my ladies in my groups that does the like Thursday folders for all the elementary school age or the junior high or the high school, and you can get your material into that is the best marketing. You can talk about marketing all you want, but one of those moms will fill your schedule.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that is so true. Education is really important. And I think it's important for anybody when it comes to fitness and nutrition. It's not just fitness professionals. The clients or people who are at least interested in their well-being should take some ownership of that. Like they hear about, oh, I've heard about creatine. What is it? Well, I've got an incredible article that breaks it down in a really digestible way. I had one more nutrition question for you that was on the top of my head. What was that? Oh yeah, you've worked with so many different age groups. I have noticed in my 40s, I'm 46, literally in a couple of weeks, and my dietary needs have shifted. Now, I have 2 points to this. One is that they shift, and I'm going to explain why that's important, or I'll have you explain why that's important. And then the second is that I've noticed that my food selection has not only changed, it's dramatically improved as I've aged, because the consequences outweigh the distaste for Brussels sprouts. Meaning that I've now acquired a taste for Brussels sprouts when you couldn't have got me to eat them 10 years ago. But now I had them last night. I have found that the reduction of, or the elimination, of processed foods, and to the best of my knowledge, unless I'm in a restaurant or somewhere where I can't control the environment, processed foods and added sugars are no longer part of my life. And I can tell you definitively that it made a substantial difference within 30 days. I noticed, my joints noticed, because I have so many injuries. I am so broken. I have all kinds of problems. I think I have 3 labrum tears, and I have tendonitis and epicondylitis, and you name it. But I was going to ask you a nutrition question. So it is that as we age, our dietary needs do change. But from your perspective, like, what do you see as a non-negotiable?
What I know you're not going to get enough of without a plan is probably fiber and calcium are really hard to get. Vitamin D also. So those are the 3 nutrients that I look for. But I think like the population, like sometimes we look at studies and, I feel like this. You and I are science people. We love the science, but like you're going to study stuff after I do it. That's how it works. You don't, some lab coat doesn't go, well, I wonder if like I asked Don Chu years ago how he came up with some of the plyo stuff. Well, I mean, obviously he got it from the East Bloc, but he's like, oh, we were out at a hill and started doing we ran uphill, we ran downhill, and we called it downhill overspeed training. And that became a thing. You know what I mean? And you're just like, so trainers will go out and try something and then, and see how it works. People dieting, things like that. So protein intake requirements are changing. Most people just don't want to do, what they want to do. People are ordering more fast food past COVID. I notice even in my own house, like I'm like, how come this food arrived? And it might be a chicken sandwich for my wife, who I'm not the boss of, by the way. You know what I mean? It's like the hardest person to coach. Even though on the creatine thing, my wife came to me a week or two ago and she's like, you're having me put this stuff in my shake. And she goes, my nails are a lot thicker than they've been in my hair. Feel my hair, feel how full it is. And like, I didn't even know if it had that effect. So I said, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know. I'll have to look at it, still have it because it's not a health benefit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like for the people that I work. But back to your original question, it definitely changes. What also changes is like my testosterone levels. You know what I mean? I was a lot more aggressive the younger I was. I like to grapple and all that. Now I'm like trying to preserve my joints. So back to nutrition, I think that the stage is 20 to 30. I guess there's some change 30 to 40, but I didn't notice much change from 20 to 30 all the way to 40. Honestly, I'm 61. I noticed a change where like, oh, my body's not right the way it used to be. Right around 55, I was mobile. I was as strong as I'd ever been. I'm smaller now. Like I only weigh like 190 because I noticed that I just don't do the volume of training that I used to do. So anyways, I'm not sure I answered your question, but there's definitely changes. You have to look at what you're doing too. Like when you're in your 30s, you're prepping meals, going to work, you've got kids. My kids are out of the house and my children are out of the house now. So, what's happening in your life, you gotta fuel for what's ahead. What's your day look like? What nutrients might you be deficient in? What habits do you have that you could move towards better? Like I brought a little cherry pie, probably a piece about this big today, but I'll have it after lunch. You know what I mean? I don't have it at 9 o'clock. So I don't have any more willpower than you do. My thing is that I'm structured in that when I'm going to have it. After lunch, I have all day to burn that up. It's not going to stick. And then the discipline was saying like, I get it, but I just don't get as much as I want. Cause I'd like a piece like this. You know what I mean? But I just don't get to do that. And I don't get to do it all the time either. I'm not sure I answered your question directly. I rambled a little bit, but hopefully something stuck there.
Actually, something that I thought was really important that I want to highlight even more, which is you don't eat that pie, the high quantity of sugar before bed, before you're going into a fasted state for a reason. Because your insulin is going crazy and you're trying to sleep, that you're going to have a real hard time with all your metabolic function.
Yeah.
I tell my clients all the time that the myth that you can't eat after 6 is a myth unless it's sugar.
Well, yeah, because that's a direct effect. But yeah.
I was raised on a dairy farm in the middle of nowhere, Washington State. And ice cream, butter, like dairy products were everywhere. Back then it was Dairy Gold, by the way, was the name of the company that my uncles worked for. Both my uncles worked there. And then we worked on a dairy called the Mudge Dairy. And amount of ice cream that was just available was overwhelming. And,
Yeah.
and we got into the habit of having a bowl of ice cream every night before bed. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, because I know what it's doing now chemically. I know what's happening inside my body now. So, but like I'd mentioned, I've removed processed foods and added sugars. I no longer consume ice cream of any kind. I can't remember the last time I've actually had ice cream. Heather tried to get me to have a bite. We're out to dinner a couple of months ago maybe. And it was, they brought they comped like a little, there's a restaurant we go to all the time. They're like, oh, you have this a little ice cream and I don't know, there's like a little chocolate sin cake or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw it and she was having such a good time eating it and it was not a lot there. And I had made the decision the moment that I saw it, I had said in my head, I said, I think that I'm going to go ahead and pass on that. And it wasn't because I was punishing myself. It wasn't because of any other reason than I have now gotten to the point where I, I don't need it and I don't want it. And so why would I force either? There's no reason for me to eat it. Now, I tell people all the time, clients, friends, everybody who wants to ask me stuff, especially like if we're at a party and then everybody's starting to like get ice creams or whatever it is. And I'm the one abstaining. I tell people it has nothing to do with like some weird fitness thing. It's just literally, I'm not some weird trainer, doesn't eat it's nothing like that. It is that I have found that my body had got enough when I was a kid and I just don't need any more. I'm good. And I've found now that I am highly sensitive to foods that are processed or high sugar. I do not find them palatable anymore, which is weird because I know that they're engineered to make themselves palatable so that you continue to buy it, especially with fast food. But the abstinence of fast food, I have a test on this, has made it so that I can taste chemicals. I can taste the process. I don't taste food. It had been 10 years since I'd had fast food, and now it's been probably about 6 years since this incident. So, I've had fast food once in 16 years. And by fast food, I'm talking about your traditional McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Carl's Jr., Arby's, all that crap, right? We were on our way to Yosemite National Park, Heather and I. In fact, I could probably even pull up the date because we hiked Half Dome. And I knew that I was going to have a tremendous caloric expenditure because our goal was to hit Half Dome at 4 in the morning, and we wanted to do a 7 to 8 hour round trip from Half Dome, from Curry Village to the summit of Half Dome, have lunch, and then come all the way back down. We're trying to do it 7 to 8 hours. The average time for people is somewhere between 12 and 13 hours. Heather and I, we used to train hard. We used to do backcountry, and I don't think that I could do 4 miles with a 40-pound pack right now. Like, because I've shifted my entire training algorithm. I'm nowhere in the endurance phase. But coming back to what I was going to say about this story, I felt that, hey, you know what? I am going to be putting out a tremendous amount of calories. We're on our way to Yosemite. We needed to get some breakfast. And so I remember as a kid that the biggest treat that I could ever get was a sausage McMuffin with egg. And so I was boyish, and I tell Heather, I said, you know what we should do? We should get some fucking McDonald's. I haven't had that in forever. And
We'll
she's
go
like,
burn it
okay.
off.
Because I'm like, we're going to burn it off. So here's the thing. I will never, ever, ever eat fast food again in my life because that one sandwich made me feel so disgusted. I was so ill. Like, I just didn't, my body was asking me, what are you doing?
Like that, yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. I've had a few clients make the personal decision to abstain from fast food as that was their choice. I don't force clients to do anything. I don't preach to them. I meet every client with their needs and with where they're at. But sometimes in the long history of clients, they've been with me 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
But the point is that I've had clients tell me that I want to move off from the fast food and the processed foods. And it so happens that just like a couple of weeks ago, one of my clients, he had to go to a business meeting, and he said, man, I got so behind the ball that I had to have like a fast food item. And he's like, never again, man. I will figure this out in the future. He's been with me for he's coming on 5 years now. And so he stopped eating fast food in our first year. He did the 90-day habit transformation program, which is it's a very immersive, it's a huge program. It's a curriculum program based on my book. And it's very robust. It's highly strategic, but still has the flexibility and fluidity for the individual. But I feel like that those little low-hanging fruits, like reducing the amount of fast food that you're eating, reducing your processed foods, cutting your added sugar, timing your meals the way that you did, not abstaining from the cherry pie, but being smart about it. And I think that that's the rub, is that people want to be unconscious and incompetent about their food. They don't
Yeah.
want to think about it. And I just tell people that we can't do that anymore, that those days are gone. You have to be conscientious about what you're eating and have a strategy and a plan. Otherwise, you're going to fail. You said that earlier, and I thought that was something I wanted to really hammer, that you have to have it as a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know what the plan is tomorrow, like how are you going to follow it? So you're going to default, especially like the older people get here. The other thing I notice is I kind of think of it this way: what you do in your 30s, you will reap in your 40s. What you do in your 40s, you will reap in your 50s, so on. So if you drank and smoked and didn't take care of yourself in your 30s and 40s, because you have time after your 30s, you can correct some stuff in your 40s, but if you're in your 50s and you're, having a few too many cocktails, eating what you want, you're working hard and all that, suddenly you're going to wake up in your 50s and it gets harder to go backwards. I don't know if you know this, but, and I will tell especially you male trainers, like if you're a big, stud out, but after COVID, I said, oh, it's time to get my blood work. And usually cancer's around 4.3 on a prostate. Mine was a 9.3. It already metastasized and spread. Anyways, I was lucky. So get your blood work done, track your health, because no one wants to wake up and because the conversation could be like, hey, make arrangements because you're done. Another month or two, once something gets into your lymph system, it'll spread. So then they do like a PET scan to see if you light up like a Christmas tree. Getting the diagnosis isn't like it is oh shit, but what's oh shit is, man, after this scan, if there's a bunch of highlights, that's all cancer. If I have one in the brain, if I have one wherever it metastasized to, which means you're going to die. And, I wasn't really ready for that. I still like, I don't know, I drive my wife crazy, but I wake up motivated every day because that's how I roll. No, by the end of the day, you know what I mean? I can lounge a little bit, but I'm motivated every day to help people. And so, it really does change your life when especially this population here, somebody's playing golf again, somebody's getting back and being active, you know what I mean? They're not afraid to do something, or it could be something as simple as helping a caregiver, or maybe the husband's debilitated or the wife is, and you're helping them like learn to be able to lift and learn to pick or even get up off the floor so you feel more confident. And I don't want to act like all older adults are not competent, because I had a guy he was at the same age of my current 96-year-old, and I had programmed him. Our benches are like as wide as my arm space, and they're probably about mid thigh height for me. And I'm 6'1". So, they don't have to get too deep. And I had programmed this older guy and his floor work. And he's like, well, why did you program it up there? You can just do this on the ground. And I'm like, yeah, it's possible. And I go, do you mind showing me? He gets down, gets back up, and I'm like, he did it just the way I did. You know what I mean? It's like, wow. And so what he did is he happened to get on the ground and get up every day, or often enough it became a skill set that he maintained. But you just can't let things go and say, well, it's hard to bend over, I won't. Flash forward 5 years, you can't bend over anymore. You know what I mean? Or do the tasks that you want that keep your life fulfilling. Everything that's ever happened to any of us that blew our hair back and we were like, wow, that was amazing. It always has something to do with movement.
Hmm.
From sex to a roller coaster, I don't care what it is. Trust me. You know what I mean? It's like movement's key. So you don't have to be the strongest guy in the world. You don't have to be the most flexible. I can't run the furthest, any of that. I just try to compare myself to myself as I go forward. And the only thing I could say is I'm not as fast. I had to sprint for the first time in a decade. Like, I did a maximal under duress sprint because I heard 911. I teach CPR here, so I train everyone. There's 11,000 people here, 11,000 residents, 2 gyms, all that, indoor Olympic sized pools. So I heard someone yell out. I was training my 96-year-old guy on battle rope. And to me, that's just balance training, believe it or not. You move a rope, trust me, you have to balance. So I heard someone yell 911 in the building, and I looked over and I started to head. Then I looked to the left in the pool because I can see through the glass into the Olympic pool, and they were dragging a guy underwater. He had had a heart attack. I saw it on video afterwards, and it's hard to get someone out of the water. So I happen to have the one strong front desk guy, and we were able to like hook my elbow under the person that was in duress and get him out of the pool quickly. You know what I mean? I started doing compressions, AED, bag valve mask. We don't give breaths anymore here. We use the bag valve mask. But anyways, long story short, he did pass. But when I looking at the person that passed, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing compressions, you can feel the ribs crack and all that. But I looked at the quality of his skin, and he was probably 78. And I thought, this guy has been in the pool his whole life. He's moved well. So when he did have that tragic heart attack, I saw it on film because the police have to watch that. He's doing a breaststroke along, and then he suddenly grabs his heart, and then he swims to the surface. Then he grabs his heart and he reaches out. That's exactly how long it took. And somebody attentive in the pool was like, oh, wait, she wasn't strong enough to lift his head out of the water. So somebody else came, and this guy. And then when I ran in, that's what happened. But to be honest, that's one of the down things is that no matter what happens here, I don't take CPR or any emergency situations the way that I would at, like a CalFit or a general fitness place. Like, somebody is going to, eventually go down, even if they look healthy as hell, but that being said, I remember the first heart attack I really tracked in my mind. I was 34 and somebody died my age, 34. And I'm like, how did you die at 34? Like, I didn't even at the time think that was possible, but you know, it's possible. Sorry about my run on story there, but it's important, you know what I mean, that people realize that, you want to be able to be active. That guy was active. He had 15 seconds of trauma with a heart attack, and then he never woke up. And I'll be honest, I've seen enough dead bodies. I was in the Army, and anyways, when someone's dead, there's the heart's not beating, but it's a living organism. And then there's you know what I mean? But you just have to do what you have to do. So anyways, I digress, but
Oh, no, it's in fact, anybody who's been in the industry long enough, especially if you're around aging populations, it's like riding a motorcycle in an accident. It's not if, it's when.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I have been involved in 3 such cases in my career.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah. One of them was actually at the In Shape in El Dorado Hills before it was in shape, back when it was Millennium. One was an elder gentleman. You've been there. The street that goes up the hill, and then you go down into he was running up and down that hill, and he had gotten to the top, and he fell and passed. But the one that I was going to parallel to another one that you were saying was we had a same gym. We had a 35-year-old man, 34-year-old man just dropped his kids off at daycare, went upstairs to cardio, had major coronary event, and we were unable to revive him right there.
Yeah, that's tragic. So yeah, so what we're emphasizing is that it can be any age. Never, I mean, I honestly, I thought I was invincible almost as far as like getting well. I'm like, I didn't drink, I ate well, I worked out with a fiend with all of my MMA and grappling buddies. I mean, we were getting down, and it's like, yeah, cancer can, it could be anything. I even make sure that I leave on time as a habit, which means I'm going to get to work early every time because I hate to see people hurrying on the freeway. You're like, that's a good way to get dead, making bad decisions, swerving in. So I think that the health and wellness, it's fitness, you know what I mean, and all its components, but it's like the general thinking of being in front of things versus having to react to other things, other people.
I think that mortality is something that we have a tendency to ignore during the day, but in the dark recess of night, it creeps into our brains. And we consider, I think everybody has moments where they have to face the reality of our
Yeah,
inevitable death. And I think that is difficult for people to consider. But I'd also say you probably should, in a positive way, consider those things. I don't think ignoring it is the best idea. Like you were just mentioning, you probably do want to go and get yourself checked and make sure you're not lighting up like a Christmas tree. And there are proactive steps that people can take, and
yeah.
not all of them are foolproof. And that's the thing too, is that I even wonder, this is just a hypothetical musing. If there was a 90% guarantee that if you maintained a high or reasonable level of fitness your whole life, that you would just one day die in your sleep in your 90s. It was like that's the average way that a human died. Do you think that with the way that things are moving now and the way that people seem to be thinking, that anyone would give a shit? Or do you think they'd continue to live their lives as recklessly as they do? Maybe I'm pessimistic because I've dealt with so many people and I've seen people make the craziest excuses and the laziness and the procrastination. But I wonder if we knew that, do you think that now people would even bother? Do you think that people would finally work out? What's it going to take? Let me rephrase this. What is it going to take for us to stop the obesity epidemic to the degree that because it's just skyrocket, it's getting worse. And even post-COVID, it's worse. Alcoholism up, cancer rates up. Everything that is negative as it relates to human mortality is up. But the fitness market hasn't changed. Yet the population has increased. The access to more fitness, even higher quality fitness and nutrition programs has improved. There's boutiques everywhere. We have more options, but less people per capita are even actually working out. We have, though, just a glimmer of hope that I'm seeing here. It appears that we're seeing a change in the way that the younger generations are looking at fitness and nutrition. Gen Z is showing signs of having lower intake of alcohol and a higher regard for the gym. I think that can be skewed slightly by TikTok, and I don't actually have a verifiable study on that. It just seems in conversations with people that they seem more likely to be working out than their millennial parents would be. But what do you think? Like, what's it going to take, Rex?
I mean, because basically what you said is there's more clubs, there's more information, there's more influencers, there's more educators, there's more Americans, and we're getting fatter and less fit. One of the things I guarantee you, because my wife and I have 3 children. The first is she's 35, the next one's 27, and then we had one 7 years after that, and he's 21. And they're all generationally different. Kylie growing up, when she was maybe around 5 or 6, there was flip phones. When my next child was born, we had like the little Razor and like smaller phones. And then when the last one was born, there was iPad and all that. So gaming, like a lot of the younger people, what I know is that if you don't learn to love movement early, it's going to be punishment. I mean, I'll be honest, like my biggest two things with fitness were like Hell Week in football, didn't like that. And then, doing the 2-a-days and all of that. And then infantry and airborne school, it's like, dude, that was like way beyond that. Like you could be passed out. I mean, you know what I mean? So to me, that's the negative side of like fitness stuff where you're being brutal. Learn to love something, dance around the house. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'll go come home and I'll hear Chicago turned way up and I'll look in the window and my wife's dancing around the house, cleaning stuff. That's her movement. You know what I'm saying? She's constantly doing chores, bending, whatever. She gets on the power plate, and does some exercises there, but she's never, ever since I've known her, she's been like, I'll move and do stuff, but I don't want to go to the gym with you. You know what I mean? And she has it up to now.
Yeah, I
You
think
got to learn to love movement early,
I think that's
you know?
likely true. I think there's been a major shift in our day-to-day activity level by the nature of technology progressing. Farmers, factory workers, they were moving. And then there was not as much access to low quality, high calorie foods. There was a lot of factors, and I understand that. I'm not just trying to be pessimistic about people in general comparatively over time. We're in different situations, but I'm just wondering what the breaking point's going to be. And I'm just not sure that I understand what it is yet.
I had a client, he was having some heart problems, cholesterol, this kind of stuff. And you get real talk with him and you say, this could lead to you dying. And I honestly know that he was like, yeah, whatever. He could accept that. He literally could. But I said, that new wife you have? I said, what if in a couple weeks, she's not your new wife and lover. She's your caretaker as she wipes the drool. Because you may not have a heart attack. You may have a stroke. You know what those are, right? Yeah. Okay. And you know how you know what I mean? So it was in a way, our real talk was, I was trying to find something like dying, I think would kind of motivate me, but that wasn't motivation enough for him.
Mm-hmm.
Having a stroke and drooling and like, no, I mean, God bless those people, but it's like not something that you want to happen, right? And you got a new wife and you've got money and you're taking trips and all that. And then pretty soon they'll be wheeling you somewhere. So that was what I eventually had to say to him, was like, well, how's it going to work out, with a new wife and all the things that you're wanting to plan and do if you ended up with a stroke? He just figures, well, if I die, I went out, on top of my game. Yeah, it's not really that way. One more thing, like my youngest, who we had a little movement problem, right? Because he'd like to sit a lot. And he's like the only one of me and my oldest son, we are not gifted physically. I had to work to do anything. This other kid, he'll live for 90 days and he'll go from like 190 to 220 or something. I mean, that kid, he hugs me now and I feel like a little guy, you know what I mean? But they all thought it was weird that during high school, I said, every hour on the hour, you will do 20 rows on that TRX that's attached to that wall. You will do the same push-ups and the same squat. And I'm not really like, it wasn't a question. So like, I did explain it, but the bottom line is because I said, and I'm not parenting like that all the time. Now he understands it. How was I going to explain to a younger kid, when he was 12, 13, 14, I just needed you to get up and I gave you a specific set of things to do. And I loved one time he said, I've been playing for like 7 hours, Dad. And, and I'm going to do them all at the end. I said, you do that. That'll be a good thing to learn. Because like 7 sets of that in a row is different than trying to do it every hour on the hour to get them up. And don't get me wrong. My kids got good grades because mama checked every day because my wife stayed home. But it's hard to get them to move as much when they don't have it in high school. The kids around them aren't necessarily like that. Then I have my older son who's a type A, he's an engineer now. He did 2-a-days training, went to school, did all that. And I'm like, I'm not even like, you're a better man than me. You know what I mean? He is tight. When he says he's going to do, I'm like, he still cold plunges. And I'm the one going, if you missed a day in a year, son, it's okay. You know what I mean? And it's like, God, I kind of, you kind of raised them when I was like in my 30s, post-military, all that kind of stuff. It's like, get it done or get it done. There's no other choice. And then now I'm a lot more laid back.
I think that parenting towards movement is a missing factor. I have a lot of clients who, in the beginning, didn't even consider that their children should be moving. Weirdly, I have a specific one. I see her every Saturday. I think she's coming up to 5 years herself. Fantastic. She's going to actually be a guest on the podcast. She's great. She's actually a sculptor, and she's at the ReaperCon right now. She has 2 kids, great kids. They always get on the call. Like when she's at Saturday morning, they'll come and I see their little faces. They say hi to me. But about 2 years ago, she noticed that there were some problems with her kids and their physical abilities. And ever since then, she came to me and she's like, what do we do? Like, can kids do this and kids do that? I'm like, well, in extreme cases, there are limitations, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about getting your kids outside, getting them playing, getting them moving. It's like, because they're glued to technologies. They're glued to their iPhones, their iPads, they have TVs. She did something, she gamified their wellness with this Harry Potter. It's a fitness game that is a Harry Potter themed game. And she texted to me and she's like, is this cool? Can I use this? She even got him little Amazon fitness trackers because she wanted to leverage the technological bend of the kids, and they love it. And they do their stuff and they play and they track their little steps. And here's the biggest thing. They ask her for whole foods. They now no longer completely want all the trash and the garbage. She's gotten them to eat bell peppers. They don't usually want to eat those things, but they are. And so she's now, and a lot of my clients do this, is that they're trying to teach their children now because they're realizing that it's a problem. And I think that some of the younger generation's interest in lifting, both male and female, is great. That's really, really good. But I still think that we're in a bad trajectory. rounding up the statistics, it looks really bad, half the population. And it's getting worse because now you got the kids. A lot of the kids are still coming in at the high level of obesity. And it's just, like you said, death wasn't enough.
Like not being able to talk or anything, the horrific things that happened with like stroke victims. Yeah. That scared him enough to make a change. I guess we have to find the things that they connect to. I'd rather find something positive.
Me
But,
too.
like you said, what's going to be the answer? It's building communities where it's easy to walk, all the things that go along with that. Sacramento is really good about like bike. I've never seen so many people on their bikes. But I also think like I have one of my children bought me the 3D things. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
Ocular thing.
Yeah, like an Oculus. And so you can play different games. So I think that if you gamify things, you have a deck of cards, or like right now, I'm gonna start a little challenge with my children to say, like, I did so many sets of this per day. But because my son's an engineer, what I've learned in this office is that I'll set like on Mondays or every other Mondays at payroll. It takes me 6 hours to do it. It's really a tedious thing, and the only tedious thing I have. So when I start, I set a 15-minute timer. Then I get up and say it's 20 squats or some push-ups or something. Then I set it at 15 minutes, and then at 20, at 25, and then every half hour the rest of the day, because I'm trying to get some work done, right? But every 30 minutes at a minimum, I have to get up and do that same specific thing. And so I build, like, say it was just doing push-ups. Well, even if I just get down and do 20, that might be 6, 7, 8 sets of 20 in a day. So that's how I build it up. And it doesn't interfere with my day. But we have to make it fun for them, and I guess entertaining. And what I see is like, even when my kid's in school, it's like run a lap. There's not a kid in the world that wants to run a lap. It's like, hey, throw this med ball, chase down it and get it. Go through the cones when you get back, then do X. You know what I mean? To me, that'd be a lot more fun. So I think that not only have they taken PE out, but there's not a lot of activities that the teachers know anymore. Even if you're a PE teacher, you might be working at a couple different schools and they don't have it all the time, just like a music teacher. So it's up to the parents to get active, but they're not going to do it if they've never really been active and they're not very healthy. So yeah, I think it has to be grassroots, like more stuff in school earlier on. I also think like I love academics. I have 2 grandchildren right now, but it's like, when you're 6, it's an hour of work, 30 minutes outside, hour of work, 30 minutes outside. Go get moving. We can catch up on some academics. They don't have to like learn, like they're so focused on academics, but nationally we're not. I mean, we have some great universities, the best in the world, but we also have a lot of marginal, 50% and down below, it's pretty marginal. We can give them time to catch up on academics if they can get, be more active. And maybe it's create a game, like if somebody's, like you pick different games or they have to vote or whatever, make it fun. I don't know if they really make PE that fun anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's a conundrum. It's something that I've been giving some thought to. And maybe one thing that we should do is another podcast, a panel, because I do want to do a few panels, and I definitely want to have you on board with them. I think that we should do an open coach brainstorming session that would be fascinating for mostly it'd be for people to hear like what us fitness professionals are thinking and what we see on the front lines and what we know works for most people, what doesn't really work. And I wonder if we were to collude, if we could get, 6 to 8 really, really high quality thinkers in the fitness industry that have our experience and talk about this, because I think anybody would want to hear that, to just literally hear us brainstorm on how do we solve this problem? Because gyms haven't solved the problem. Nobody's solved this obesity epidemic problem. And it's been an epidemic now for 15 years and nothing has improved. It's just getting worse. So what do we have to do? And like I said, it's a saturated market and it's really, really hard to play in now. And I find it a fascinating topic that we've done a very poor job as an industry in solving.
Yeah. But yet, what I noticed, like when I was in, say, high school, junior high, elementary school, if there was a kid that was heavy, and I'm not one to ever pick on anyone because I would never thought to do it, but there was always just like one or something. All of us were kind of, homogenous in that way.
Yeah.
Now you have the elite kid that has a pitching coach, a speed coach, a strength coach. You know what I mean? He's got all this elite level coaching the kids putting out. I noticed like when I worked in Granite Bay, the kids that want D1, you always see them in the gym at 6 a.m., like running the sports group, you know what I mean? All ages. But, those are the kids that have the drive to do that. But anyone is capable of doing it if you build that up. And we have to start them early enough to get them loving movement. But, and maybe it's more VR games as opposed to Xbox games or on, a little console. So they're actually having to move. There was Pokemon Go and all those kinds of things that, That's what it was called, right? The
Yeah,
act where
yeah,
you had to
yeah.
go
For a while
find
there.
stuff like a treasure hunt. But if you don't make it convenient in your neighborhood, like I mostly my military family, but I mostly grew up in Southern California, and housing complex, orange groves, housing complex, field. Man, we could find some place to play all the time. Now you literally have to drive your kids somewhere because you're like, wait, your friend lives where? No, that's too many major streets. You're definitely not crossing that. When I was a kid, you left and like there wasn't as many cars. People weren't quite as in a hurry. So I think that, my parents felt safer, and then you only went so far, really. But now one of the people that your school that you want to go hang out with might live 8 miles away.
Yeah, it's true. But I think that the one conclusion that I came to was, if unless you can get parents to suddenly change their own ways, which would then by just the osmosis change what their children are doing, seems to be the most unlikely thing to happen based on market evidence. I'm hoping that what happens is, especially with some of the social media, that some of these younger kids get more inspired about fitness. I thought Ninja Warrior was a great thing. I think that we got a
Yes,
huge surge of
yes,
kids wanting to do that, but then
parkour.
COVID came and most of those places didn't survive that. But
Yeah,
I think that those kinds of things, getting children to fall in love with the potential of their bodies, like what they can do with it and how that translate is priceless. And just getting that back, moving that mentality away from, if I have a heart attack and I die, I don't really care, to like, I want to live for as long as I can with high levels of mobility, with peace of mind about my body being as optimal as it can be because I took responsibility for it and as a good steward of it. And then when I die because I lived the best that I possibly could for as long as I could. How do we get that mindset? I think it's going to be the younger generation. And I'm the reason I'm putting my head around this isn't necessarily a business thing, but obviously, you got to pay to play, but there's got to be a way that we can come up with something that gets kids excited about learning fitness and nutrition early on. And I don't know. Well, I was even thinking about making some kids courses on basic exercise and making it cool, and then like having these nutrition classes. You're a very graphic guy, like your. I've seen your presentations, and you always have cool graphics and stuff like that. And
yeah.
Heather, she's a graphic designer. So obviously that's why Forge looks good and everything we do looks good, because Heather's extremely picky. She's the American Marketing Association names her as one of the best graphic designers in the country. So
Wow, that's
she's
awesome.
top level. Anyway, the point is that I would love to find a way to solve that problem. It may be too big for me, so we should do a panel and see if we can come up with anything out of it. The other thing is that I've really enjoyed this conversation. It was so good to catch up with you, and I know
Me
we I
too,
know
Michael.
we just completely ran out of time here. It's just crazy. I had a couple other questions for you, but you know what? We can save them because we have so many different opportunities to get back together again, and some of them have to do more with like some of the mindset things that you've learned over the years. But I'll save those because I want to do another episode on coaching to mindset. And what I love doing with this podcast, my goal is to be able to bring value to both fitness professionals and to their clients. And I think we do a really good job of balancing these where
Yeah,
that's the point. I really want people to get an inside scoop as if they're like a client, but also allows me to collude with other fitness professionals so that we can make the world a better place through the profession that we chose, with the intention of just being the best that we can be for our clients, and then exposing how simple it really is when you bring it down to just the brass tacks. Being fit to just a general degree isn't really that hard. It's just about prioritization. It's also about managing your body, keeping the mobility where it needs to be, having the right nutritional balance, making sure that you are living the best that you can, because it changes everything when you're fit, and resonating with the people who are saying, if I have a heart attack and I just can't get over that, that's gonna bug me all fucking day. Like if I have a heart attack and I die, like like that is just so nonsensical to me. I don't want to have to edit everything what I want to say out, so I'll just save it. But I just find that to be an inappropriate way to think about one's life. It's so cavalier and dismissive, and it says it's a low value proposition of yourself. And maybe that's a problem that we have to learn to address. And it's only until he put his wife in the situation that he was going to take any responsibility on her behalf. I don't know, man. It starts with you. It starts with the individual. You got to start there. You can't live for your wife. You got to live for yourself. Then you can
yeah.
take care of her, not put her in that situation. Because strokes, and I'll tell you a story real fast. Heather's late father, he was this guy. He had 3 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and 2 PhDs. His PhDs, one was in physics related to red wave technologies, and the other one was in theology. And his mission was to scientifically prove the existence of God. It was
Those are the right degrees then.
fascinating listening to him talk. He was also an ordained bishop. So just like beyond intelligent, so smart that he was unable to monetize it because the personality traits that typically go with that level of intelligence, they didn't move into that circle, So he struggled with his finances up to the day he died. But he smoked, he drank a little bit, but smoked, and he didn't move. He was also 6'9". He was a giant human being. When he'd shake my hand, I felt like it was a catcher's mitt. He was just a big dude.
Yeah.
He and I became very, very close. I remember he would work on all of these theories, and he would write math as if he were just writing sentences like you and I would in a journal. But his was mathematical computations. We had a 300-foot storage shed, 300 square feet, I should say, storage shed, and it was his chemistry lab where he had all kinds of electronics and microscopes and chemistry stuff. In fact, we're going to be we have somebody, a homeschool family, who's coming here tomorrow to pick it up because we have no use
Must be
for it.
recent then.
Yeah, we're donating it to them. They have 4 kids, and they would love to have all that equipment, so we're going to be giving it to them. And then we donated something like, I believe it was 1,400 books on mathematics and religion. Just the guy was an immersive guy, but he basically killed himself with his lifestyle. He ended up lighting up like a Christmas tree, but this was after he had a stroke, and we got a call from one of the neighbors, and they were basically saying he's on the floor. We can't get him up because he's 6'9", and she even happens to be a nurse, a geriatric nurse, by the way. And she's like, I can't move him, I'm telling you right now. But she's like, he needs to go to the hospital. Ambulance came in. It took firefighters, everybody to get him up. They get him to the hospital. He had a pretty severe stroke. We flew down, and he was unable to talk for a couple of weeks. He was in a wheelchair for a month, and then he was able to recover his speech, and he seemed to be pretty good. He still had to walk with a cane and a walker up until he passed. I think he had his stroke when he was 68. And then his health just bombed. And by the time he was 72 years old, he basically, when you saw the degree of the cancer, his entire lungs were just blackened. His liver was it was necrotized. And then on top of that, he had this giant brain tumor, and he was having massive headaches. They did take that out. And then we saw it was the most heartbreaking decline. I would say 6 months of absolute misery, and the final 3 being like stuff that you just don't even want to see, And the worst part about it is almost all of these things could have been avoided. He just neglected himself, and it was really, really tough. That was a tough few months there. But during that time, he actually read my book, and I was really nervous because I had to go to Nevada, and Heather stayed here. Heather basically was here for 3 months, and I would only come back, I think I'd come back every 2 or 3 months, or excuse me, every 2 or 3 weeks. I'd fly back because it starts getting expensive going back and forth. And so I happened to be back home in Nevada, and he calls me. He's like, I just read your book. And he said, and the first thing I'm thinking is, oh gosh, he's so smart. He probably is going to poke all kinds of freaking holes in it. And I said, okay, well, give me all the negative stuff first, and then fix it with all the good stuff, if there's any. And he said, he's like, there's nothing negative except for there was some punctuation problems that I found. That was nothing serious. He said that he absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then he's like, I wish that I had read this book 20 years ago. He's like, and maybe I wouldn't be laying on my deathbed right now calling you, telling you how good it was. And he's like, it's too late now, and I'm not going to do anything about it. What is interesting, though, just as a side note, he did quit smoking for about a year, the last 3 months of his life. And I quote, he said, fuck it. And not only did he no longer go out onto the porch, he just lit up in bed, and he had never done that in his life. He never smoked indoors until the last 3 months of his life. And he just basically, he gave up completely and utterly,
Did he pass of a respiratory disease or?
Well, yeah, the primary thing that killed him was the lung cancer.
Yeah, because I was about to say, I've seen that all the way to death too. So anyone out there that's listening, I don't care how hard you think you are, the last thing you ever want to die of is a respiratory disease. And if you don't believe me, have someone stick your head underwater and slowly drown you and see and let it, you know what I mean? It's like, it's brutal in a way that's like, just die. You know what I mean? It's like the respiratory, it's like day by day, by day by day, they're spitting up fluid that's backing up and you can't take it. Anyways, it's to me, it's the worst death. brother died.
I'll go a little more graphically for you on this. The last 3 days of his life, Heather was basically vacuuming his liquefied lungs out of his mouth all day long. And I had seen him the week before he died. I was here for like 2 or 3 days and it was great. And I knew he was dying. We had just left Ursa and we had just left from San Diego. We flew into Dallas and coming off the back of 3 days or a week of fitness seminars. And he was still able to talk. And he was just very kind because he knew this was the last time I was ever going to see him. Great conversation. But then I went home and then literally within like this 3 or 4 days later, maybe 5. And I was on a Zoom call with Heather and he starts choking and she gets the vacuum and I'm watching her vacuuming him out. And then he started making a weird gurgling noise and she's like, Dad, doing the shaking thing. And he didn't respond. And then bile and stuff just started leaking out of his mouth and he just died. It's terrible.
Yeah, I've soaked it up myself with
Crazy.
3-4 big bath towels trying to like soak all that. Because, like what you just said, it's like it's backing up from the lungs. You might be getting this part, but trust me, it's filling this up. So enough on that stuff. But like it's worth at least, you know what? Here's the basic minimum. What do you always want to be able to do in your life? For me, I want to be able to get off the floor, walk up and down stairs at a library or something like that, or some event that I'm going to go to and basically be out of pain. That's at least wellness, being, disease free. Fitness is another level, and I get where where somebody's like not totally into that, but you can build into that. It's a long way from here to there.
Yes.
But as you get competent, like, I did the 2 stretches and 10 squats he gave me in the morning or something, or the balance thing or whatever it is, and then you build on that. You know what I mean? And it doesn't get any harder than that if you're just building like this. You know what I mean? Because then you have your plan for life. So, you know what? You're right. Maybe getting something. I don't know how to reach like more people because there's more people. There's more people overweight, deconditioned, and then the United States, obviously, because I think you did a lecture on this. We are the people that not live the longest, but that we're the longest sick. I think it's 12 years of your last 12 years or something are miserable, and it's like. That's when you're least able. Like, I'm 61. I'm not as strong as I have to be careful. Like if I'm lifting something heavy or something, when I go hit and kick the bag, I do a little bit more of a warm up. I just don't like launch into like high kicks and things. But, you have to figure out what you want to be able to do and then how you can maintain that. And if you don't start early, it's just painful to you. Like, you're not used to eating something that you don't want. But, there's so many ways, like your Brussels sprouts. The first thing I thought is olive oil, bake them, season them. They get crispy on the outside. Suddenly they're delicious. I don't like them just, otherwise. But when they're baked like that, olive oil.
Yeah. Olive oil, great number one anti-inflammatory food as long as it's quality. But yeah, man, this has been a great conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it and sharing stories back and forth. I know there were some questions left on the table, but I felt like I love the way this conversation went organically. I find it such a blessing to have people like you that are in my life and in our clients' lives, the people we serve. I'm so fortunate, and I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you're even got people knocking on your door and calling you, and you're still just A+, man. I really appreciate you a lot. So thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to follow you on social media, or if or they have questions about what it's like to be in the situation where you're training at older adults? Like, do you have any contact information that you want to put out there?
Yeah, you know what? My name is Rex. So just Rex at rexowens.com, REX period, or REX at, Rex Owens. And my last name is OWENS.com. I have a YouTube channel, but I'm working on some content. And so it's going to be in the next 3 to 6 months. I'm going to be, launching that and going down that because I really want to help more the training side on some specific areas that I find valuable. But Rex at rexowens.com, I'll reply. Would love to hear from anyone. And I have a Rex Owens YouTube and movement and strength I have on Facebook, but I haven't been doing a lot with social media in the last year, and I'm about to pick up the content because I see AI and social media are a way of reaching more people to help them.
Yes, and also it's where people are getting their information. They're getting long format information that's usually AI generated, and they're also getting social media clips that the typically 60 to 90 seconds of bite-sized information. If you want to help people, you got to play that game. If somebody were to ask me, and they have, what's the one mistake that I made with the development of Forge? It is that I ignored social media up until this year, because you already know this, I hate social media, and I really despise it. I think it does more damage than it does good for most people.
Yeah.
And I don't have to prove that personally, because all you need to do is go onto X or TikTok or any platform and then just scroll, and then you'll see exactly what I fucking mean. It's terrible. But
My
especially
children show me like the influencers because like I don't see them otherwise, and it's like I don't know why. Just if you're born like people that like have basically are naturally gifted as far as form, and then you think because you did a little bit of workout, that makes you an expert. I mean, I'd rather have somebody that's heavy, um, you know, and then lost weight. I'd rather learn from them than some like remember the gal that wrote the book Skinny Bitch, and I'm like, wait, so you've been skinny all your life, and you're going to advise people that haven't been skinny all their life? I'm not sure that follows. I want somebody that struggled through it. Like if you're an easy gainer of muscle, well, I'm not. It took me like 8-10 years to go from 167 to like 200 pounds. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, hey Rex, thank you so much, buddy. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. We'll catch up again soon.
A pleasure, and I was honored to come on, and I hope you'll have me as a guest again.